Chapter 6. I don't imagine you expected this bad a deluge when you decided you'd remove to Yorktown. Thomas Hopewell had a penchant for declarative sentences, which was fine as long as Thomas didn't expect Garrett to hop to every time he spoke. The man annoyed him. Garrett didn't understand why, and he didn't care. Indeed, I did not. "Are you staying here with Mercy, then?" Mrs. Hopewell, direct as her son, picked up the inquiry. "I stay in the kitchen." "And what is it exactly that you do, Mr. Tyler?" Garrett offered. "Mr. Tyler, yes, that's right. What do you do, Mr. Tyler?" Mrs. Hopewell picked up the line of questioning. "Not sure yet," Garrett floundered. They were Mercy's friends, after all, and they were looking out for her. "I am a scholar. I just finished my education. I find myself without my family, and so I must make my way in the world." Eloquence he'd never possessed poured from his mouth, but it sounded good, so he'd take it. A scholar. Thomas couldn't be much more in age than Garrett, and yet he seemed decades superior. "Don't hold much with scholars. It's real work the world be needin', not the soft hands of a scholar." Garrett nodded his agreement, and more eloquent words came out. "And yet, when knowledge informs our decisions, do we not have a better chance of succeeding in our endeavors?" "Perhaps." "Miss Hansford was kind enough to offer me shelter during the storm. I would not wish you to get the wrong impression of her kindness." "Mercy is kindness itself," Thomas held out. "Indeed she is, and is in need of someone to guard her from the selfishness of others," Mrs. Hopewell added. "We believe a match will be announced soon between our Thomas and Miss Hansford." Thomas stood a little taller. "Enough, Mother. None of that has been settled." "It's past time it should be settled, Thomas." Thomas Hopewell turned to face his mother, and his mother stiffened her spine and raised her chin. But she stayed quiet. Garrett smiled inwardly. For all his guff and declarative sentences, Thomas loved his mother. Garrett had seen his face soften toward his daughter. Garrett had to concede that Thomas was not a bad man. He would never beat his family. Relief eased his stance. Garrett still didn't like him, but he was leaving. On the night of December 24th, he was out of here, and he began to see that he couldn't do that if he had to leave Mercy in cruel hands. He wasn't sure he could leave Mercy at all, but that was a thought for a different time. After the storm and its aftermath, which he knew would be brutal. The one tree he'd seen come down was surely just one of many. He'd seen pictures they'd never seen or would ever see of hurricane disasters. The only saving grace was that there was no electricity, no downed power lines to hamper the restoration work. But how would they do it with no power equipment? No bulldozers, no chainsaws, no motors of any kind. "Mrs. Hopewell, I took the liberty of retrieving one of Mamma's gowns for you. I'm sure it will be too large, but—" Mercy gained the floor. Evelyn trailed in the steps behind her in a faded dress that swept the floor. "I'll take dry, Mercy Hansford." The formidable woman nodded as she took the gown from Mercy. Mercy directed her to a room upstairs. "Come with me, child. I will require your help." "Thomas, I retrieved a shirt and breeches that were Papa's. They'll be too short." "To echo my mother, Mercy, so long as they're dry." Mercy pointed him to the other room on the first floor. "Where do we put them?" Mercy's heart warmed at the "we" in his statement. What a blessing that he'd shown up when he did. "The wind is still quite strong, so we may need to stay on the bottom floor." "Then you women should stay by the fire." Mercy raised her eyebrow. "I know we don't have a fire right now. As soon as the wind calms down, we should build one so you and the other ladies can warm up." She nodded. It's what she would have done for Evelyn and Mrs. Hopewell's sake. "You men can sleep in the workroom Thomas is in now." Thomas strode out of the far room, looking like an orphan boy. "I did not realize that your father was so much smaller than me," he grinned. "Nor I." My son cuts quite the figure wherever he is. I'd put him up against King George himself, his mother piped as she gained the last stair. Are you warm now, Mama? She transferred her grip on the handrail to his arm. Yes, much better. Miss Mercy, are you working on doll clothes for Christmas? Evelyn asked. No, just boring old shirts, but I have some ideas if you'd care to help me with them. She took Evelyn by the hand and brought her to the workroom. They couldn't see much in the shuttered dim light of the storm. Time for a candle. She struck the light and her favorite room appeared from the shadows. Her father's workbench lined the far wall. To her left, shelves of fabric, and on the far left, a bin where she placed the large scraps to be used for finishing pieces, and, when the season called for it, doll clothes. It was from this bin that her mother had taught her to sew, and her father had taught her to tailor. On the opposite wall, all the patterns that her father had specialized in rested in orderly fashion, just as he'd left them. The patterns he'd assigned to her sat to the right of his. Ooh! Evelyn's pleasure at the sight mirrored her own. I never get tired of coming in here myself. You could make anything. Mercy smiled. Yes. On the wall behind us are my bowl shelves. You can't see it very well, but there are bowls of thread organized by color, buttons, ribbons, and all kinds of trim. Except the one you'd be looking for at the time, her father's voice whispered the old family joke. A twist of sadness wove its way through her midsection. At least the laughter was returning. What would she do if she had to leave this room and all her memories? Let tomorrow worry for itself, her mother's voice now whispered. Mercy took a deep breath. Tomorrow. What size will you be needing for this doll of yourn? This is Bessie. Evelyn handed over her doll, a bit worse for wear. Mercy smoothed stringy yellow hair back from the worn cloth face. Her finger caught on a hole in the back of the gown. I have just the thing. Mercy laid Bessie down on her workbench and lit another light. Take this and go to the bin. Find some material you like, and we'll take it from there. Mercy made a few calculations and waited for Evelyn to select the best silk she could find. She couldn't decide if the child would come back with a crimson, blue, or green. Mercy would have chosen the crimson. She couldn't get enough of the color as she'd made the gown for Mrs. Figg. If there'd been enough, she'd have had a gown for herself of the same fabric. I forgot that was in there. The gold-striped silk glistened in the candlelight. No red for you? No, miss. I like the gold for Miss Bessie's hair. You have a point, but I confess that crimson is still my favorite. The girl giggled. Now, a gown for such a discerning lady as Miss Bessie requires we... In less than 10 minutes, she'd given Evelyn enough work to keep her busy for at least an hour or two, depending on how well she plied her needle. Once she was done, she thought the doll could use a new set of underthings. That should keep the child busy through the morning. She'd quite forgotten the men and women they'd left in the other room. Her stomach knotted. Mrs. Hopewell deserved her name. Mercy knew Mrs. Hopewell wanted Mercy to marry her son, and for a while Mercy thought she could. She didn't love Thomas, but he wasn't all bad. Commanding, yes, obnoxiously so sometimes, but she didn't think he was any worse than any of the other men in her village. The attack changed everything. She rather thought she'd stay single now. The marriage bed held no more mystery, and the fact it didn't could leave Thomas to annul their marriage should there be one. And she found she didn't much care what he thought anymore. Garrett knew the attack had been against her will. He'd understood, and that meant God could too. He must. He was the creator of the universe. Surely he brought Garrett here, and Garrett had understood. She arrived in the room to find a standoff. Garrett sat in the chair he'd occupied all day next to the cold hearth. Thomas's mother sat at the table, and Thomas stood by his mother. Thomas, won't you sit? I'll see what I can fix to eat. I'm not hungry, thank you, Mercy. I could use a cup of tea, but we have no fire. Mrs. Hopewell hooked her hands together in her lap. Evelyn put her candle on the table next to her grandmother and began her work. I've decided that the women shall sleep upstairs and we men will sleep down here. That should satisfy all the proprieties. The women will sleep in this room, Thomas, and you two, she pointed to Garrett and Thomas, may sleep in the workroom. The door between them should be sufficient. Evelyn, gather your things and go upstairs. Mrs. Hopewell stood. I'll get you settled. The wind is still strong, Mercy countered. Flooding is imminent. The streets are rivers of barrels. I still think downstairs. I'm not in the habit of discussing my decisions, Thomas interrupted. It isn't your decision to make. Garrett had a nice ear for mimicry. He stood in front of her now. Mercy stepped to his side. This is Miss Hansford's home, and you are a guest in it. Mercy felt her face flame. She forced herself to remain silent. Garrett was right. This was her home, and she would not be ordered about in it. Thomas stiffened as he glanced from Garrett back to her. As you wish, he bowed.